You are holding your phone in the dark. The screen is the only source of light in the entire room, casting a pale, cold, bluish glow across your face. It is 3 in the morning. The house is completely silent. Your thumb moves in a slow, repetitive, almost robotic rhythm. You scroll down. You pull the screen to refresh. You watch the little loading circle spin for a fraction of a second. You wait for a new headline to appear. There is a tightness in your chest, right behind your ribs. It is a heavy, dull, relentless pressure that makes it difficult to take a full, deep breath. You are not reading about politics. You are not checking messages from friends or family. You are reading about the sun. You are reading about an X-class solar flare. You are reading about a coronal mass ejection that is hurtling straight toward Earth at millions of miles per hour. And with every single new article you open, with every new warning you read, that tightness in your chest twists just a little bit more. You swallow hard, but your throat feels entirely dry. The silence of the house is broken only by the low, constant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen down the hall. That hum is the sound of electricity. It is the sound of the power grid working exactly as it should. And right now, sitting alone in the dark, you are absolutely terrified that the hum is suddenly going to stop. You know this feeling intimately. It is a very specific, very modern kind of anxiety that creeps up on you when you realize exactly how fragile everything around you really is. You read the words internet apocalypse and a cold wave washes over your skin, leaving goosebumps in its wake. You start to think about what that phrase actually means. It is not just about losing access to social media feeds or being unable to stream your favorite shows. It is about the absolute, suffocating silence that would follow. It is about waking up in the morning and realizing that your bank account is completely inaccessible, trapped behind a dead screen. It is about realizing that you cannot call your parents who live 3 states away because the cell towers have gone dark. It is about knowing that the GPS in your car is dead, and the supply chains that bring food to the grocery store down the street are entirely paralyzed. You look around your bedroom. You look at the router blinking its steady, reassuring green light in the corner. You look at the digital clock on the microwave glowing in the dark kitchen. Every single thing that anchors your life, every single thing that makes you feel safe and connected to the world relies on invisible lines of power and data. They are fragile threads of copper and glass, and you are reading that a burst of magnetic energy, born 93 million miles away in the violent atmosphere of our star, could wipe all of those threads out in an instant. You feel entirely alone in this fear. Tomorrow morning, you will go to the grocery store and you will see people walking down the aisles, arguing about the price of eggs, complaining about the traffic on their morning commute, laughing as they look at their phones. And you will look at them and think, do you not know what is happening above our heads right now? Do you not realize that a G3 geomagnetic storm is slamming into our upper atmosphere at this exact moment? You walk through the world feeling like you are carrying a terrible, invisible secret. You feel like you are the only person who is actually paying attention to the fragile thread that is holding modern civilization together. Every single time the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration releases a new space weather alert, you feel your stomach drop. You start checking the solar wind speeds and the interplanetary magnetic field data the way other people check the daily weather forecast. You learn terrifying terms like high-frequency radio blackouts and geomagnetic-induced currents. You memorize them because they feel like the vocabulary of the end of the world. You carry this weight silently, trying to pretend everything is normal, while constantly waiting for the lights to flicker and die. The fear lives in your body long before it reaches your logical mind. You find yourself looking at power lines when you drive to work, imagining the geomagnetically induced currents surging through them, imagining the massive transformers overheating and melting down. You think about the submarine fiber optic cables resting in the freezing darkness at the bottom of the ocean, stretching for thousands of miles to connect the continents. You imagine those long lines failing, severing the digital nervous system of the entire planet. You live in a state of perpetual anticipation for a disaster that makes absolutely no sound. A silent apocalypse delivered by the solar wind. You cannot prepare for it. You cannot fight it. You can only sit in the dark at 3 in the morning and watch the headlines pile up, feeding the panic that tells you civilization is just one large solar flare away from collapsing back into the 19th century. And then, June 30th, 2026 happened. Maybe you live in North Carolina. Maybe you live in Arizona or California or one of the 30 states that experienced it. Places where the night sky is supposed to be quiet. Places where the only lights in the sky are supposed to be airplanes blinking in the distance and pale distant stars. But you stepped outside that night. You stood on your porch or you walked down your driveway and you looked up. The sky was not black. The sky was red. It was a deep, glowing, bruised, terrifying blood red. It looked like the atmosphere itself was bleeding out into space. It stretched across the horizon, shifting and pulsing in absolute, unnerving silence. It did not look anything like a sunset. It looked wrong. It looked deeply, fundamentally wrong. It looked like a warning. And for a second, standing there in the warm night air, your breath caught in your throat. Your hands started to tremble. Not because the air was cold, but because all those headlines, all those articles you had been doom scrolling at 3 in the morning, suddenly manifested right above your house. It was no longer abstract data on a screen. It was no longer a theoretical threat. It was real. It was right there, painting the clouds in colors that your primitive brain instantly recognized as massive danger. You felt an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. You realized in that exact moment that we are just standing on a tiny rock, spinning blindly through a violent universe, completely at the mercy of a star that could swallow 1,000,000 Earths without noticing. You went back inside, quickly. You locked the door, as if a deadbolt could protect you from the sky. And you opened your phone again. You desperately needed someone to tell you what was happening. You needed someone to say that it was just a harmless light show, an optical illusion. But the feeds were full of the exact same apocalyptic tone, the same warnings about the grid collapsing, the same panic. You sat on the edge of your bed, feeling the weight of the entire solar system pressing down directly onto your shoulders. You felt like you were waiting for the lights to flicker and die. You felt like you were waiting for the end of the world to finally begin. This is the modern condition. We have built a world where we know entirely too much and control entirely too little. We have advanced satellites staring at the sun every second of the day, measuring every single burst of radiation, every violent tangle of magnetic fields. We have emergency alerts pushed directly to the screens in our pockets the absolute second a solar flare erupts. We have all this incredible information, and instead of making us feel secure, it just gives our anxiety a sharper, much more painful edge. We know the exact velocity of the coronal mass ejection. We know the exact hour, the exact minute it will impact the magnetosphere. But knowing the impact time does not give us the power to stop it. It just gives us a countdown. It gives us hours and hours to sit in the dark, imagining the absolute worst-case scenario. It gives us time to imagine the power lines melting, to imagine the vital submarine cables that connect the continents short-circuiting at the bottom of the deep ocean, to imagine the sudden, terrifying, permanent silence when the internet simply stops working forever. You start to wonder if the scientists are downplaying it. You wonder if the government agencies are deliberately hiding how bad it really is just to prevent mass panic in the streets. Because when you looked at that blood-red sky, it did not look like a routine weather event. It did not look like science. It looked biblical. It looked like the kind of terrifying event that gets written down in ancient texts and passed down for thousands of years as a myth about the time the sky caught fire. You feel a deep ancestral fear waking up inside you, a fear that was hardwired into human beings long before we had electricity to lose. You feel the primitive fear of the dark, the profound fear of the vast, uncontrollable unknown, the feeling that the heavens are sending a message, and the message is that our time is up. But what if you are interpreting this entirely wrong? What if the absolute terror you felt when you looked up at that red sky is not a reaction to a modern technological threat at all? What if you are not actually afraid of losing your internet connection or your GPS? What if you are simply experiencing the exact same awe, the exact same overwhelming, paralyzing emotion that human beings have felt for thousands of years when they witnessed something vastly larger than themselves? This feeling you have, this sense that the sky is delivering a terrifying message, it has a history. It has a name. In 1555, a man in France sat in a room surrounded by flickering candlelight and tried to find the right words for this exact same terror. His name was Michel de Nostredame, Nostradamus. You know the name. It has become entirely synonymous with doom, with the apocalypse, with vague, terrifying prophecies that people drag out every single time the world feels unstable. But Nostradamus was not trying to scare you. He was an observer. He was writing down exactly what he saw and trying to make sense of a universe that felt deeply, unpredictably violent. In his famous book Les Prophéties in Century 1, Quatrain 46, he wrote about something very specific. He wrote about a great fire from the sky falling for 3 nights. He wrote about the earth trembling afterward. For centuries, people read those exact words and saw the definitive end of the world. They saw the wrath of a punishing God raining down. They saw literal meteors falling from space and burning entire cities to ash. They read that quatrain the exact same way you read those headlines about the internet apocalypse, through the lens of their own deepest, most contemporary fears. They assumed that a fire in the sky could only mean total destruction. But Nostradamus was not predicting a technological collapse in the 21st century. He was not predicting the end of human civilization. He was describing something much more real and infinitely more beautiful. Atmospheric physicists and historical scholars have looked very closely at those 16th century words. They have meticulously compared them with historical records of extreme space weather, and they know exactly what he was describing. Nostradamus was describing a severe geomagnetic storm. He was describing a massive solar superstorm hitting the magnetic field of the Earth, pushing the auroral oval so far south that the night sky over 16th century France turned a deep, terrifying blood red. He saw the exact same thing you saw on June 30th, the great fire from the sky, the red aurora. He did not understand the advanced physics of it. He did not know what a coronal mass ejection was. He did not know anything about magnetic reconnection or excited oxygen molecules high in the atmosphere. He only knew that the sky was burning, and it scared him enough to write it down for future generations to read. He felt exactly what you felt: the awe, the terror, the profound realization of how remarkably small we are in the face of the cosmos. But here is the truth that changes everything. It was not the end of the world in 1555, and it is not the end of the world now. What you called a warning of the apocalypse is actually just the sun breathing. What you called a fatal threat to everything you hold dear is just a physical interaction between a star and a planet. Professor Mike Hapgood has spent his career analyzing the precise physics behind these extreme space weather events. When you read his work, the fear starts to dissolve, replaced by a deep, stabilizing, almost beautiful understanding. When an X-class flare erupts, it is incredibly violent. It sends a massive wave of charged plasma hurtling across 93 million miles of empty space. But Earth is not a fragile, defenseless target sitting quietly in the dark, waiting to be destroyed. Earth has a shield. We have a magnetosphere, a massive, invisible, dynamic magnetic field that completely surrounds our planet. When that wave of solar material hits us, it does not just crash violently into the surface. It hits the shield. The magnetosphere compresses. It catches the blow. It channels that unimaginable energy away from the surface, guiding it safely along the magnetic lines toward the poles. And during the most severe storms, during the G3 and G4 events, it pushes that energy much further south than usual. When those charged particles hit the upper atmosphere, they collide violently with oxygen molecules. The energy excites the oxygen, and the oxygen releases that energy as light. Red light, glowing 80 miles above your head. The red sky you saw was not a fire falling to destroy you. It was the absolute opposite. It was the visual proof that the shield is working perfectly. It was the Earth catching a massive punch that could strip away our atmosphere and turning it into a breathtaking display of light instead. You do not have to carry this anxiety anymore. The tightness in your chest, the fear of the sudden permanent blackout. It is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how prepared we actually are. The headlines thrive on your panic. They love to sell the idea of a fragile world constantly teetering on the edge of a dark age, because fear gets clicks. Fear keeps you scrolling at 3 in the morning, generating revenue. But the reality of how we handle space weather is entirely different. We are not blind. We have eyes in the dark. Satellites like the Solar Dynamics Observatory and the DSCOVR satellite are sitting out there right now, suspended perfectly between the Earth and the Sun, watching every single fluctuation. They never blink. When the Sun fires an X-class flare, we know instantly. When a coronal mass ejection leaves the surface of the Sun, we watch it travel every inch of the way. We have 15 to 36 hours of advance warning before that plasma ever touches our magnetic field. That is not a guess. That is operational reality. And in those 15 to 36 hours, the world does not panic. The people who manage the power grids, the people you worry, are completely ignoring the sky. They get the alerts. They go to work immediately. They enact automated surge mitigation protocols. They shield the massive, vulnerable transformers. They balance the electrical load across the entire country. Yes, high-frequency radio blackouts happen. Yes, specific shortwave bands on the sunlit side of the Earth experience disruption for a few hours. But the grid does not melt down. The internet does not vanish into the ether. We brace for impact, and we ride it out perfectly. You were terrified because you thought we were helpless. You thought a solar storm was a surprise attack from a hostile universe. But it is not. It is weather. It is space weather. And just like we board up our windows before a massive hurricane, we prepare our electrical systems before a geomagnetic storm. We have learned to read the moods of our star. We have learned to live comfortably with its violence. We have built an infrastructure that expects the sun to erupt, and we have built the protocols to protect the grid when it does. The silent apocalypse you have been dreading in the middle of the night is a ghost story told by algorithms that profit from your fear. It is not the reality of the people who actually monitor the sky. Go back for a second to that warm night in June. You are standing outside again. The air is still. You are looking up at that massive blood-red sky stretching over the trees. Your heart is racing. Your hands are shaking. You are holding your phone, desperately wanting to search for answers, desperately afraid of what you might find if the internet goes down. Look at that sky again, with what you know now. That red glow is not a threat. It is not the beginning of the end. It is exactly what Nostradamus saw when he looked out his window in France, hundreds of years ago, trying to understand the universe. It is the Earth actively protecting you. It is the invisible shield taking a massive planetary hit and dissipating the energy safely 80 miles above your head. It is not a sign of our modern fragility. It is a sign of our profound, ancient resilience. It is the planet standing between you and the violent heart of the solar system and turning the danger into a masterpiece. The red sky was never a warning of the end. It was simply the oldest conversation between the sun and the earth, and you were just lucky enough to be standing there to see it. If you made it this far and this story resonated with you, it is worth clicking on subscribe. The algorithm of this platform only shows this content to people who signal that they want more. And we have many more of these stories to tell. Tell me in the comments. I want to know exactly where you were when you saw the red aurora and what was the very first thought that crossed your mind before you knew what it really was.